So hello everyone and welcome back to our interview series on staff publications and projects. On today's episode, we will be talking to not one but two faculty members, Dr. Judith Keilbach and Dr. Hanna Surma, who are currently working together on a fascinating project regarding Videoland. So first of all, thank you for being here today and for your time. Could you start by introducing yourselves and your positions at Utrecht University?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting us. My name is Hanna Surma. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Media and Culture Studies, media and television scholar, and coordinator of the MA program Film and Televisiewetenschap, Film and Television Studies. And I mainly teach in that MA program and in the BA Media and Culture.
All right, hi, and my name is Judith Keilbach. I'm an associate professor at the Media and Culture department here in Utrecht, and I'm also involved in the master's program. It's a project on data-driven screenwriting. It's really a very small-scale ethnographic project, and we are researching how the streaming service Videoland uses viewing data in its creative or in its production process.
So Videoland is a Dutch subscription video on demand service, and Videoland functions as an online distribution platform for programs originally broadcast on all Dutch RTL channels, television channels, and for licensed content from abroad. And a few years ago, Videoland also started to commission original content, that is drama and comedy series and non-fiction content. The project we worked on is also, or the series we worked with is also part of the Videoland original portfolio. So content that is commissioned by Videoland.
And so what we did was basically we took part or observed several meetings in which viewing data of one particular television series were discussed. So there are a number of different teams at Videoland that deal with data. There is a team that collects and evaluates data. And there are teams that are busy more with content creation. And they were also very interested in this viewing data. And they, in a way, were thinking about using these or use these data to advise, you could say, producers and screenwriting about their storytelling that viewers prefer. So based on this data. And what was super interesting is that this was a process that was pretty new at the time that we started our research. So we were really there from the beginning on and could really see how they are dealing with data, how they try to implement them in production processes. And that was super interesting for us. Something we could also add is that we not only were present at the meetings, but we also had a number of interviews with several people from the data team, from the content team, and also with the producers and the screenwriters. And in the beginning, we really assumed that the producer, in particular the screenwriters, experience this data as a restriction of creativity. So this was our assumption, basically. But then it turned out this is like one of the results that they handle or they deal with data totally differently. And this is maybe something that Hanna can talk a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, we found it first, like one of the first results that we could talk about. We found it very productive to approach the way in which viewing data are used and negotiated and communicated as a current form of audience testing, or audience research practices in the television industries. And these practices in themselves are, of course, anything but new. And various authors have discussed audience research in the television industries as a tool to come to more informed decisions about the development and production and renewal of television series. Yet in her work, and that is something we used in her work on audience testing in the Danish television industry, media scholar Eva Redwall also points out that aside from being such a tool for executives, and you could also say a power tool, of course, different forms of audience testing can also be seen as a dialogue-based tool that allows creative workers to learn more about their audience preferences, about their evaluation of storylines or main characters. And based on our observations, to get back to our project, when we saw how curious the screenwriters actually were, and not that skeptical at all, what we expected, which, as Judith just pointed out, based on those observations, we argue that the role that viewing data currently play in negotiations between executives and creative practitioners like screenwriters can indeed be understood as such a productive dialogue-based tool. So our case study shows that creative producers and screenwriters really embrace the diagnostic use of data, and that is feedback based on viewing metrics and audience evaluations of content that viewers already watched. And they embrace it to learn more. They're really curious about viewers' preferences and opinions. But at the same time, we were able to observe that the same creatives, especially the screenwriters, unsurprisingly, didn't really think about a more direct corrective, or you could also call it prescriptive function of the data. So what exactly needs to change in future content based on the opinions or the behavior of viewers that is being collected through the data. And exactly this corrective function, if you want to call it that, is of course of great interest to the executives who are commissioning the content, who motivate the use of data and all these processes they go through by the possibility of improving content specifically designed for streaming platforms. So they want to make their content better. They want to convince viewers to subscribe to their service, of course, with their original content. So while executives really claim that all these creative decisions should ideally be fueled by data, that's their position, we saw that creatives still, and of course also because, as we mentioned, these processes are really new, and they were really new to the screenwriters and producers we talked about. Screenwriters, yeah, they stick to the credo to always trust your gut. So they're interested in learning more about the data, but they don't implement it like straight away. It's at least not what we observe.
And maybe to add something else, so this was basically the production part, so how data are used in production. But what we found also super interesting from a more theoretical perspective was that data are somehow boundary objects in the terms of actor network theory. So a lot of people talk about data. Data bring people together in the different teams of Videoland, and everybody, they communicate about the data, although data always means something totally different for all these different people. And fascinating, I think, is also that the data are boundary objects in the sense that it also brings the industry and us, academia, together, because we are now communicating with them as well about their use of data. And this is also something that I found super fascinating, how you can use theory to describe a production process here.
So our MA program, which we're both involved in, the MA program Film and Television Studies, has a strong focus on production studies and media industry studies. And so our students learn a lot about that. We teach it, and then our students, of course, also intern for various companies within the Dutch media industry. And a former student of ours actually got an internship with Videoland. And he was fascinated by what Videoland actually does with data, by the link between creative processes and viewing data. And he told us all about it. And we were at the time already interested in creative practices and production practices, but also creative practices like screenwriting. So we've been organizing, for example, roundtable discussion series here at the Department of Media and Culture Studies on screenwriting practices. And when we got the chance to actually sit at the table there at Videoland, we just grabbed it because we wanted to combine this interest in creative practices like screenwriting and production processes within the Dutch media industry and the current use of data within these industries.
We have more students who inspire us to do certain kinds of research projects. That's really true. So, yeah, this is something that I really like about this master program, that it's also for teachers super inspiring depending on where students do their internships. So, yeah.
What would you say is the kind of main aim of this project? What do you really want to achieve with it, or specifically really explore with it?
Basically, we really want to understand production processes in the current television industry, here in the Netherlands at least. And so we were basically interested in creative work and how creative work changes or is impacted by, you know, new technologies. And one of these is, for example, the use of data. And so this is really a project about work process, about processes, about creativity. So that was what we are interested in.
Our contributions, well, in the long run, also try to contribute to a specific field, or you could say contribute to filling a still existing research gap by exploring the ways in which these data practices influence cultural practices like media production. So this is really from a production studies perspective, not from a data perspective, but how these practices influence media production on a micro level. So really getting in touch with creative practitioners, with people working in the media industries, observing what they are doing, talking to them, and actually drawing conclusions on a micro level. Because that will, of course, also provide some insights into current practices in specific national media industries, which will then allow us in the long run to compare different strategies in different broadcasting or media contexts.
You could also say this, in a way, it also has to do with data practices, and not only in creative work and not only in the media industries, but this whole idea that data, well, data changes a lot, but in the end, everybody talks about something super differently if they use data. And this is something that is also really has nothing to do with the media industry, but this is something like you talked about it, Louise, about the critical or humanities perspective of data. And here we really see how that works. Like, they talk about totally different things, but they use the word data and think it's the same thing they are talking about. And that's really fascinating. And we learn a lot about what data are or are not from this critical perspective.
Is there anything else you would like to share with the viewers, maybe considering how we interact with these platforms or with data?
Well, everything you do on streaming platforms, if you binge something like 3 times in a row, if you stop in the middle of an episode, people, of course, should be aware of the fact that everything they do in interacting, not only with streaming platforms, but platforms in general, but in streaming, everything we do is, of course, collected, gathered. Yeah.
This whole idea of actor network theory, maybe that it is really important if you wanna analyze data, criticize data practices, make sure that you know that all of you talk about the same idea of what data are, because if not, you're just, talking not to each other, but, you have different concepts, and that's not very good if you want to analyze it. So,
especially in this media and culture, because we are looking at data a lot more, so it is worth always considering there is the more science and math side of data, and then you have got that humanities, media, production side of it. So it's worth always being aware of that, I think. So thank you so much for giving us this great interview. I'm looking forward to hearing more about the project. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much.